So we're going to head to before you start. And we've met all our prerequisites. We have our subscription, and we have a service principal, and we know that we're a contributor on that subscription. So we've verified all that in advance. And go check out the previous videos if you haven't done that yet. We know the app ID and the password of our service principal, which is required to deploy. So the way we're doing it here is the app ID. I do store that locally, but the password I store in an environment variable because you never want to persist that type of secret. So that's what we do to keep it secure. And again, we have a contributor RBAC role assignment on the Azure subscription. We've configured a client environment. Again, we're using the Windows subsystem for Linux. We're using Ubuntu 22.04, which is known as Jammy Jellyfish. That's the code name for it. So it says, hey, make sure that you can start a new bash terminal session. Okay. So we're going to be using VS Code primarily as our way of interacting with our client environment. Because it lets us both view all the sandbox code in VS Code, but it also gives us a nice terminal environment, bash terminal environment, and PowerShell terminal environment. So the way that we had launched that before was I suggested maybe you just go in and run your Ubuntu app. And that brings up a terminal, a bash terminal, right? Well, VS Code isn't in here, so what we want to do is we want to get into VS Code. So if I do an LL here, you can see that I've got my Azure Sandbox directory. That's really the context that I want VS Code to be in when I open up VS Code. So you can just do a CD Azure Sandbox, and you can just do a code space dot, and that will launch VS Code in the right place. And here we are. So you can see we got a little welcome screen here with lots of cool information about cool stuff in VS Code. So we'll close that. And on the left, we have our GitHub repo with all of our Azure Sandbox code. And we're going to be working in here, VNet shared, as part of this video. So I'm going to expand that. And then down here, we've got a bash terminal, and it's opened up in the Azure Sandbox directory. So if we maximize this, we can see more of the terminal. If I do an LL, you can see that these folders and stuff here, they line up with all the folders on the left in this Explorer view. So this is just a graphical way of navigating all the files and folders that are in your GitHub repo. Yeah. So that is, kind of like a bootstrappy way of launching VS Code. I'm not going to do that moving forward. I'm just going to launch VS Code and just pull up the right project, right? So notice what happens here. If I close VS Code and I close my Ubuntu terminal and then I launch VS Code again, you could see it opens up the last project that you were working with. So I'm already in the right place. And that way I don't have to go through launching the terminal and changing the directory and all that kind of stuff. And you could go over here to File, Open Recent, and it'll show you all your recent projects. And it'll know, hey, that's a WSL project. So I need to run that from WSL versus a Windows project versus a PowerShell project or whatever. Right? So we're in the right place. And we're ready to start deploying some stuff. So I'll switch back to the website. and it says verify you could start a new bash terminal session. Well, we've verified that. Here it is down on the bottom. Here's our bash terminal session. Okay. And then it says, hey, go check the version of the Azure CLI you're running. So we'll do an AZ dash version. Okay, so right now I'm running Azure CLI 2.50.0. And it says go check the version of PowerShell that you're running. So we're running PowerShell 7.3.5, and that's running in WSL, so not in Windows. So that's kind of a little bit of a mind scrambler for some people, but the types of scripts that we develop to deploy here are Bash scripts and PowerShell scripts, and we run them both from Linux. Okay, so to do that, we need the Azure CLI and PowerShell installed in advance, which we did when we were configuring our client environment. Verify that you have cloned a copy of the GitHub repo with the latest release of the source code. We did that. We know we have that. Here it is. Okay.